Okay. He ain't coming out. Okay.
Let's ride.
Well, I had to pull over because I couldn't seem to activate the camera on the fly. So, let's try this one more time. Just like showered. It didn't like rain all day or anything. It just had a brief shower. So the road is relatively clear, seems like. You know, this guy on YouTube, he's got a pretty big following, probably like 250,000 viewers, subscribers. And he's an atheist, and he did this rant. I'm not going to like advertise for him, but I just kind of wanted to touch on some of the points. His whole rant was basically about how the European how Europe has abandoned, they're not enforcing the rule of law. Well, the United States isn't, for that matter, either, particularly with respect to immigration. So there's mass immigration going on, you know, from the south into Europe. There's mass immigration from South America coming into the northern to North America, United States, and so forth. But one of the things in particular I wanted to address with respect to Europe, and maybe even this could apply to the United States as well. As some of you, if not many of you already know, atheism has become very fashionable, I guess you could say, or prolific. And I would submit there's several reasons for that. If there wasn't, if the parents were not particularly like church-going, or you know, real big persons of faith and that sort of thing, 9 times out of it, and that's not to say that there haven't been families where the parents have been staunch, you know, churchgoers and advocates for their faith and so forth, and you know, the children kind of just sort of get different ideas in their head and they go off and do their own things. You know, Wicca, witchcraft, or you know, they become atheists. And the problem with atheism is that there's no real baseline with which to on which good is predicated upon. Yet, you know, the entire human experience seems to be a dichotomy of things. I mean, you have positive and negative electrons, neutrons, and so forth. You have positive, I mean, from the molecular level all the way up to the, you know, all the way up to the, what do you call it? I guess you could say from the molecular level all the way up to the societal level. That's probably what I'm trying to say. So there's, you know, but there has to be a fundamental baseline from which, you know, good is. There has to be a foundation. There has to be something with which you gauge, you know, good against bad, sort of thing. So in Scripture has done that, particularly outlined in the Ten Commandments, if you will, or I guess you could. They're not suggestions. The reason why they're commandments is because they're rules. In other words, you follow these rules and you should be fine. If you don't, you're going to have problems. You know, either small or great. And then it goes on to explain what those things are. First, you're not to acknowledge any other basis of good, but that being upon the primary source of good, which is God, what we call, or Christians call God. If you seek to derive your source of good from somewhere else, you're going to run into problems. That's one. The other one is you're not to bear false witness. You're not bearing false witness so that people can trust and believe in you, and they have faith that if you say you're going to do something, that you're a person. That's where the expression "a man of your word" comes in. Is that if somebody tells you they're going to do something, they've done it, or they do it. So back to the whole this guy who has been an advocate for atheists and other sort of progressive policies and that sort of thing. So he's complaining about the Muslims coming into Europe and the whole rape situation. Right? How the Muslims get across justifying rape, I've not investigated it, but it is a bit, beyond me. So I'm thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. Here this guy has been advocating for atheism, and now he's complaining because the European Union or their elected officials are not enforcing the law. Well, I say to myself, maybe that, I wonder if that isn't because most of Europe has decided that, one, there isn't any such thing as a God, and so two, if that's the case, you're going to end up with a lawless society, because in atheism, if good can mean anything to anyone, it ends up meaning nothing for everyone. I mean, really, that's where it winds up. That's where it goes. It's a zero-sum game, basically. Now, why people? Now, that's not to say that there aren't people that are having a hard time, I guess, believing in God. I call myself a person of faith, and sometimes even a Christian. I identify myself as a Christian most of the time, because, and it's not to say that I don't struggle with my faith, because on the human scene, or to the human sense of things, there does seem to be, it's kind of like a paradox. So, if you want to call it a puzzle that needs to be solved, I guess you could call it that. I never really I try not to accept things, just, on the face of a situation. Whether it's an individual who maybe appears to have the wrong attitude about something. You never know what's going on in back of that, what's motivated that person to feel or think the way they do. There could be a lot of contributing factors, and so there's more to there's more to a lot of these things than meets the eye. And so, what am I smelling? I wonder if it's... Okay. So the Europeans, and that's not to say that there aren't Christians there, you know, and people that, so here we have an atheist who is complaining about the fact that his leadership is not enforcing the law. And I'm like, well, duh. I mean, a lot of you have more or less abandoned your faith, and in so doing, you've abandoned the very fiber and of what's meant to retain the integrity of your societal construct. So, I mean, you're reaping what you sowed. That's really what it comes down to. Now, I've kind of gotten to a point where, I mean, as I started to say before, I think there are genuinely people that you know, I started to say that there are people that are having a problem believing in God, and they're not really sure. They may think that there's something there. Of course, that falls into the category of being an agnostic, where they believe that there's something there. They're not sure what it is. They can't explain it. And then you have all of these like different subcategories of atheism, like agnostic atheists, but then you just have the rank and file, hardcore, freaking vitriolic like thing. And then they try to use quote logic and reason to justify their position. When to have logic and reason, you also have to have there has to be a fundamental truth, a baseline for, you know, which to argue your point, because then it just becomes a freaking collage of opinions.